How's it going, guys? I'm Faerghast, or Gast, or Gas Station. Honestly, a lot of subscribers still don't know who I am anymore because of the name change, so yeah, I'm still here. Please watch my videos. So how come people don't like Gilbert? In a nutshell, as a unit exclusive to Azurmoon, he's solid. Similar to Shamir, he's very straightforward in where he'd like to go. As a character, however, that's where things get dicey. He's made some massive life choices that he's come to regret deeply, and at the expense of his, spoiler alert, even though it's 5 months down the line, daughter and wife. As a huge Annette fanboy, my first instinct was, oh my naga, literally I'm going to end this man's whole career. But then I thought, it wouldn't be very on brand to immediately dump on an old Fire Emblem guy. So as usual, let's take a look at his unit performance. Gilbert's earliest possible recruitment is in Chapter 13 in Azurmoon only. As a Fortress Knight, he's entering the ring with the following stats: 61 HP, 26 Strength, 9 Magic, 17 Dexterity, 2 Speed, 10 Luck, 29 Defense, 7 Resistance, and 17 Charm. For growths, he has 55 HP, 45 Strength, 20 Magic, 45 Dexterity, 30 Speed, 15 Luck, 45 Defense, 10 Res, and 35 Charm. As far as weapon proficiencies go, he has B ranks in lances and axes. He is D+ in authority, B in heavy armor, and C in riding. For combat arts, Gilbert starts with Spike and Shatter Slash and will learn Glowing Ember at A rank lances. Starting with Spike is helpful for extra power, but he is already at the necessary rank for brave weapons. As a Fortress Knight, he'd benefit well from a Brave Lance if you're looking for him to kill things on player phase. You can try Brave Axe, however. Those aren't very accurate, and you may have other axe-wielding units who would benefit more from it. Dimitri, Ashe, and Sylvain come to mind here. His stats are obviously geared towards being in armor, and his personal skill will give some additional damage reduction if he's in a battalion as well. I personally found Gilbert pretty useful in Chapter 13 and 14 because of his stackable protection at 29 base defense with a battalion, and even being able to pick up a Hexlock shield in Chapter 13 for some defenses in that chapter as well. Enemies are gonna tank that guy. He also comes with Smite, which is a great repositional tool too. In my first playthrough, my Dedue fell off hella quick because of how I handled him in Blue Lines and not the game itself. Making him a War Master was like a mistake, or putting him in that line was, and Gilbert made a great backup tank. Because of his proficiencies, he can get to a Great Knight at good pace, but Great Knight is kinda not that good. Instead, he can actually make it into a Wyvern Rider and start the process for him becoming a Wyvern Lord. Wyvern Lord already plays a lot to his strengths with the added mobility that a Great Knight can't give. It takes a bit of time to get him there, and he doesn't have a really good pass rate to passing Wyvern Rider, but the end result is a capable flying tank. He'll still do fine as a Fortress Knight or a Great Knight, but the fact that he has the ability to more easily get into one of the best classes in the game is something you'll want to think about. His res is naturally Garbo, and when with the abundance of late game mages in Azurmoon, his stock may also decrease the more you go on since he'll get torn apart by them. But I find his role of one of the most reliable tanks in the game to be valuable if you don't have anyone else left. Another weakness is that he doesn't come with any blow combat arts, specifically Death Blow or Armored Blow, so if you want to let him roll with the Brave weapon, it'd be a wise idea to get him into a Brigand and quickly get it since he already has the ranks to just kind of jump into it. Because Gilbert is so exclusive, there's not really a lot to compare him to, so yeah, I can't really think of anything else to say. If you want to use him, he'll be a tank, he can make a good Wyvern. If you want to use him as a mage, he gets Thoron and Ward, I guess? Anyways, you guys aren't here for the unit analysis, so let's get that out of the way. Let's get into the meat and potatoes of this, which would be his character analysis, which I've written significantly more on.
Professor!
Gilbert was a young man when King Lambert first knighted him, and not only was he sworn to protect him, but to also guide and teach both Lambert and eventually Dimitri in all things battle. During this time, Gilbert was described as an ideal knight, utterly above reproach, excelling in bravery, wisdom, and tactics. He was a role model for young squires aiming to be knights themselves. With a loving wife and daughter, Gustav Eddie Dominic was living his best life, fighting for his king, his people, his family, and his beliefs without a crest either, so take that, society. But that's hardly how one would describe the somber and sad-looking old man that we see in the game. Gilbert's characterization revolves primarily around the guilt and self-hatred he feels about two things: his role in the tragedy of Duscur, and second, the guilt and self-hatred he feels over his actions after the tragedy. An event which, to remind everyone, was an ambush against the royalty of Faerghast by those who slither in the dark, which saw the murder of King Lambert, Glenn, and * Lady Patricia. Gilbert was supposed to be accompanying the king on a trip to Duscur, but for some reason he was only able to rescue Dimitri and bring him back to Faerghast. He believes that he should have died protecting his king that day and blames himself for his and the others' death. Even if Dimitri forgives him, even if Lambert would have forgiven him, Gilbert cannot accept himself for breaking his vows. His knighthood, his pride, and his beliefs were lost. all that remained was shame. So he vanished, abandoning his country that he let down and his family to pursue a life of repentance for the lives that he feels he could have saved. He would find a home in the Church of Seiros and become one of their knights. It is here we are introduced to him for the first time. While Gilbert has clearly fallen from grace, there are several traits that define his character outside of the tragedy and its consequences. He is a mentor to Alois, Ash, and Dimitri. Gilbert teaches Alois how to fish, but the two end up standing near the pond, bittersweetly reflecting upon their past. As Gilbert mentors Ash in combat, he also helps him find what it is he will fight to protect as a knight, leading into Ash's realization that his ideals are to defend his late adoptive father's pride and his ambitions. With Dimitri, there's a lot to unpack here, but what Gilbert manages to do is confront Dimitri about his desire to straight up give up, roll over, and die. It is, in my opinion, a massive and important step forward for Dimitri's characterization in his redemption arc, and it serves Gilbert's character as it gives us more insight into how Gilbert has decided to atone for the tragedy of Duscur. He also has a couple amicable friendships with Manuela and Hanman. Manuela manages to crack a smile on the old stud, and she regains her confidence in her singing, and Hanman befriends him. Surprised, Gilbert cracks yet another smile out of happiness and because of his new friend's own charm. Notice that these two amicable friendships have Gilbert cracking a smile, to which his allies recognize. Indeed, the old, spirited, fiery-eyed warrior from the past has all but diminished. I think it's important to understand why Gilbert chose to abandon his family. I know for some folks watching that alone is enough to hate him. The thing is, for the people of Faerghast, knighthood, pride, and shame are much more important to its culture than in other places. Take the playable characters in Blue Lions, for example. Ingrid prioritizes Dimitri's life over her own and accepts that she is expendable for the greater good. Ash wants nothing more than to become a knight, and Dedue's entire behavior towards knighthood has been shaped after hearing stories about Gilbert. Gilbert's knightly vows have been his first priority for the 40-something years he served in Faerghast. Gilbert abandoning everything as part of his penance for breaking his vow to protecting Lambert, even if the circumstances made it impossible for him to do so, is conceivable enough in this culture to be justifiable. Could he have stayed alongside Dimitri and attempted to restore his name over time as Ash suggested? Yes, but at the time he felt this was his only choice. If Gilbert's characterization only had to do with him finding his pride again, then this video could focus on the effects that his allies have on his self-esteem. Or it could perhaps be a study on how important pride and shame are in the culture of Faerghast compared to the Empire or the Alliance. But there is a variable here that separates our Ginger Stud from the other folks that fit this diminished knight archetype. Gilbert turned his back on his wife and daughter. And boy oh boy is that daughter hungry for answers as to what the heck he was thinking.
You really think it was foolish to abandon us?
I do.
Then the least you can do is apologize. I'm fine, but Mother deserves as much. I finished my studies at the School of Sorcery and the Officers' Academy. I have a busy and satisfying life now. But Mother, she's waited for you to return all this time, living under my uncle's roof.
I am sorry, Annette.
I already told you, don't say that to me. Apologize to Mother. Let her see your face.
That I cannot do. I know you do not understand, but it is the way of things. As for you, Annette, say the word, and I will disappear from your life forever. For now, though, I must return to my duties.
Father, how could you be so cruel? I was back then, but I'm not a child anymore. It's too late for this now, Father. It doesn't make me happy anymore.
Annette.
I was so lonely after you left. I was always alone. I didn't know where you were or who to turn to for comfort. All I could do was look at the dolls you carved for me and remember you, and weep.
If you don't need it, you can throw it away. It is all the same in the end. I am sorry, Annette. I should have given more thought to my actions.
Father, wait! No, this won't do at all. It would be better to throw this doll away. You are too cruel, Father. Of course I could never throw it away.
In both conversations, Gilbert runs away, leaving her to comment on how cruel her father is. He just won't apologize to his wife for some reason, which is all his daughter wants him to do. The thing is, Gilbert is well aware of the steps he must take to atone.
If only I had made it to Dusker more quickly. It is my fault that His Highness Dimitri has become the way he is now. After that, I abandoned my wife and child and fled my homeland. I turned my back on everything I swore to protect. My sins are countless. I will bear the weight of my guilt for as long as I live. Apologizing to my daughter and wife, devoting myself to His Highness, that is the way to atonement. And yet, even if I am granted the forgiveness of those who still live, praying is all I can do to atone to those who are with us no more.
To be blunt, Gilbert is too ashamed to reach out and apologize to his wife. He believes that what he's done to her was too severe to deserve to ask for forgiveness, and because of this, he refuses Annette's insistence to apologize to her. The resolution to his character arc is staring at him right in the face. And that's the big internal problem that Gilbert has. It is only he who will decide when the time is right to apologize to his wife. However, the longer he waits, the guiltier he becomes. So the most he can do is fruitlessly pray for the dead. The dude calls him out hardcore and tells him that his prayers are mere self-indulgence. And it's true. Gilbert can only wallow in his self-hatred and pity because the alternative is something he is too ashamed of doing. He chooses to continue his downward spiral rather than face his wife and truly atone. It sounds oxymoronic, but he simultaneously is self-loathing and egotistical. With that said, don't get me wrong. I don't just sympathize with Gilbert's problem, I actually empathize with him very much. Yeah, I really like Gilbert's character for the situation he's put himself in. I'm actually going through something similar, although obviously less extreme and medieval than this, to Gilbert's issue. I find that the dilemma with the growing guilt and shame without apologizing because of that guilt and shame, and embarrassment in my case, is something that feels very human. And it's inspiring me to make things right with someone I've slighted in my own life. It might come off like I've written it in the video to make it sound like some very easy thing to do to solve Gilbert's problem, but the reality is, at least for me, is that knowing how to break the cycle and finding the courage to break the cycle are two very different things. It's a weird phenomenon. It's like a sunk cost fallacy with emotions. It's not so easy to let so much time pass and then just decide to own up and apologize, even if the unintended consequence of the lack of action is to the pain of his daughter and wife. Is he truly a bad dad like Annette says? Yup. He says so himself. I believe this was the intent behind his behavior, and in that regard, I can appreciate this nuance behind the diminished knight archetype that Fire Emblem likes to explore in characters like these. This direction is all well and good. Unfortunately, it is not at the hands of his trooper daughter, Annette, that mainly facilitates his change. Instead, it is Byleth who is the main actor here. In the B support with Byleth, they tell Gilbert that praying won't help bring the dead back to life. This apparently sends a shock to Gilbert, and their B support abruptly ends there. Yet somehow, because Byleth calls him out for this, their A support has Gilbert completely turning around into someone who not only is expressing a desire to invite his wife to the monastery to live with him when the war is over, but also, somehow, miraculously, he pulls himself out of his near decade-long penance.
Yes, I've learned there is strength in focusing clearly on tomorrow and allowing yesterday to be done. Your words from when last we spoke have stayed with me. They bring to mind the king I first served. He told me not to dwell upon the dead. The dead are dead, and those who live are not bound by them. I intend to live my own life from now on.
Revisiting Annette's A support, Gilbert hands her a bunch of written letters to her and her mother during the time he was away. So she then sends them to her mother on his behalf. This is meant to convey that despite Annette's and her mom's fear that he hated them the entire time, he in fact loved them, but was too ashamed and guilty to send them. It's not the most ideal outcome, of course, And I would have liked it for Gilbert to have the courage to see his wife himself, but instead, this near decade-long path of retribution or penance or whatever and self-loathing is resolved because Byleth told him to stop holding this pity party for himself. I don't think it's fair for either Annette or Gilbert's growth that a walking amorphous personality in legitimately 2 lines is able to cure Gilbert of his self-loathing. The relationship between Annette, Gilbert, and his wife is complicated, and it took 4 conversations for Gilbert to merely warm up to the idea of uniting with his wife again. What Annette manages to do is hold Gilbert to a promise that after the war they would visit. The resolution with Byleth being significantly less long with an arguably better outcome than with his daughter for Gilbert's spirits is unsatisfying to me. It takes a special kind of charisma to be able to persuade the man who can ignore his crying daughter's pleas. Gilbert's unit performance as a physical tank with good ranks gave him a high ceiling as a combat unit. With the gold standard skills and equipment, he'll become a serviceable tank throughout Azure Moon. As a character, he's an interesting nuance to the Diminished Knight. His character is one that upon more and more thought feels very relatable and human. And it took me a long time to start to understand his struggle and how relevant it is to the real world. His downward spiral is a reflection of an unpleasant side of human nature that people, even myself, go through. However, the resolution of his arc should have had less to do with Byleth and more to do with the people who are most directly affected.